All right, so finishing the notes real quick. So you should have already watched the video about us kind of reviewing the first 60 slides that we already covered in class. So this video right here will be basically me going over the last little bit that we did not cover. All right, so let's get started with these. Like I said in the last video, if you want to take down notes or jot down, little things that you think might be important or might help you with your project, you can do that. But as long as you're paying attention, listening, and reading over the notes, that's fine without writing notes. All right, so floodplain. So looking at a floodplain is basically where we see a valley, and it's basically talking about the valley floor that's covered with water during a flood. So when a flood comes, basically a flood can happen from a lot of rain. Basically, it does not infiltrate. So when it does not infiltrate, basically what that does is it causes that flooding, the puddles, all that stuff that you see in your yard. So that's the same thing we're talking about here. Typically, floodplain will more or less stay flooded more than a yard will. So it's just basically the different elevations and all that stuff that will cause the water to stand there. And this is more in like a valley. So a valley is like between something, usually like a rock or higher pieces of land on each side. Some issues, you have some sediments that will be deposited. So basically what this does, it makes the floodplains fertile. So fertile means, good for growth, plants, farms, anything like that. So fertile is usually good for growing certain things. So looking at some precautions, the only ones we're really going to worry about here, you got some artificial leaves. We'll talk about those. The flood insurance. So basically, your parents, or when you get older and you get a house, flood insurance will be important, depending on where you live. Some places have a lot more chances of flooding, which will cause your insurance to get higher just in case a flood comes and ruins your house. Basically, evacuation. Around here, you don't have to worry about it, but in certain places, when hurricanes or tsunamis come around, in those flooding areas, basically evacuations will happen when their house is underwater. They'll be sitting on the roof, and someone's kind of got to come and get them because their house is underwater. Limit floodplain development. What that means is they try to stay away from areas that are flooding. So they try not to build no houses, businesses, anything like that in those areas because they don't want to chance their houses getting ruined by flooding. So meander is basically when we start to see some curves in a river, and basically what happens is it's caused from obstruction. So obstruction means something's in the way. So if the door's closed and you're trying to go in your room, clearly that's an obstruction, so you can't get in your room. But once you open the door, you can get in, right? All right, so what it's talking about here is if you have erosion occurs on the outside of the bin, also deposition occurs on the inside of the bin. So basically you start to have these curves because there was something here. So basically what has happened here is something's built up, and then the water makes its way and starts going around it, and then you'll start to see that curve form, and it'll stay like that. Oxbow Lake, basically this is just a crescent shaped body. So if you look here at the first part, you can see how basically it formed just like kind of like a S almost. It went around, and then over time you had some sand and silt, which some materials and debris is built up here. So now the lake runs straight across. Over time, this right here will be your Oxbow Lake. Long as it won't get anything from the other new channel right here, but it will stay with some water here and refill from rain, anything like that. So stages. So you got a young river. Usually young river is brand new. It looks more like a V shape, has steep sides. Next is mature, so it's starting to get a little different shape that looks like a U. Basically from all the runoff, all that stuff is starting to make the slope more curved, and it's starting to break down all the sediments, all the rocks and all that stuff, and changing the shape. Basically that old river, it's been there for a while. It'll start to be like a more flatter U, and the sides will be a lot more sloped because of all the rain, the runoff, anything like that. It's wearing it down over time. This is just some pictures, so you can see here, this is a new one. Next stage mature, it starts to break down, and now it's gotten a lot wider over the years. For example, this one right here. So a delta is basically the deposition that's a feature that starts to get built up from sediments. All right, so basically those sediments starting to get built up, and we'll start to see that form where a stream enters a lake or an ocean. So basically, it will occur because all that water is starting to slow down, and then it will empty into another body of water, changing its original stream. All right, so a dam is basically a barrier that obstructs the flow of water. So a dam, humans create them. We use them for energy, sometimes electric energy. That's how it's an alternative energy source using those dams and those turbines. Also, we have beavers, animals that build dams, or sometimes a tree just falls and will create its own dam, stopping the flow of water. So you can watch this if you want. Basically, this is just showing like a dam kind of how it basically bursted down and kind of collapsed in 1976. So you can watch that if you want. So the roles of wetlands and ecosystem. So ecosystem is basically how animals interact with people or their habitat. Anything where living things and non-living things are. Wetlands will prevent flooding because basically it holds a lot of that water in like a sponge. So basically, if you stick a dry sponge in the sink, it would absorb it, and then basically you lift it up and it's a lot more heavier and a lot more full. Basically, the natural water quality will improve, so these wetlands will help the overall ecosystems, water quality improve, be a lot more better for us and animals. Shoreline erosion control, so it does help some of that shoreline erosion. You remember erosion is when basically stuff starts to break down, floating from one place to another. It helps fish and wildlife, anything in the habitats. Looking at that. So wetland loss. So basically, we're starting to lose wetlands due to habitats or from stuff that we're building. So we'll take away those wetlands and put houses, businesses, anything like that to cause that urbanization. So wetland and estuary degradation. So we're talking about basically getting rid of them. They're starting to kind of go away. All right, so they're starting to degrade because urbanization, us building houses, shops, stores, factories, anything like that. Also agriculture, so farmland, areas for animals to roam. Cows, anything like that. Agriculture, marines, mining. So mining also takes up a lot of that land as well because of certain resources from there. All right, so an estuary is basically an ecosystem in which fresh water from rivers mix with salt. All right, so basically you have fresh and salt water that is mixing together. So an estuary is a little bit of mixture of fresh and salt water. Basically, it has a lot of nutrients. All right, so all that mud at the bottom has a lot of nutrients from the areas where it's mixing together. A lot of times you'll see marsh grass, which is the grass you see in that picture. Basically, that starts to grow there and it's growing in that mud. All right, so that's kind of what an estuary is. It's kind of connected to the ocean, and it's kind of its own little body of water as well. So a marsh is basically freshwater wetland that contains no woody plants. So basically, you don't see any trees here. A lot of times, if you ride by marshes, you'll see a lot of what's it called birds, animals nesting there because it's not really deep, it's not really shallow. I mean, it's more shallow than deep. So marshes are definitely a habitat for birds. Swamps. All right, so swamps are where we'll see a lot of those trees. They can be very shallow, contains a lot of algae. Sometimes they can cause flooding. Most time you see a lot of shrubs, trees, anything like that growing in there. Typically a lot of algae. So we learned in the last video, with that algae, you can't really have many fish. So not many fish will be living in here. So the water ecosystems, you got freshwater lakes, rivers, wetlands, swamps, and marshes. All right, so that's typically what we'll see from that fresh. Then of course, estuaries are the mix of fresh and salt water. So those are the two different. You got one that's all fresh, and then one that's a mix. Saltwater intrusion is basically when we start to see the movement of saltwater moving into freshwater along the coast. So this is when you got fresh, and then it's starting to run along into the ocean. So how long or how does it occur? So basically what will happen is that salt water is high mineral content than the fresh water, so it's more dense, which when it's more dense, it means it's going to be higher water pressure, and then all that salt water is going to start pushing underneath the fresh water and change the continent and all the materials that it's made of. So do human activities make a difference? So basically human activities can cause issues depending on the coast or, around the area, working, building stuff, anything like that. Also drilling. So drilling is a problem if it's along the coast. So you can kind of mess up those channels or those drainage canals and they start to intertwine, causing that mix. So does the weather make a difference? So saltwater intrusion can be also, worsened or happen more during hurricanes. So when that hurricane can cause a sea level rise or a storm surge, and we'll basically take all that salt water and fresh water and mix it together, making that saltwater intrusion even more likely to happen. So what is basically an issue for the intrusion of salt water? So it can contaminate our drinking water sources. All right, so we already talked about that. We don't have much fresh water available like we do salt. So when it mixes together, that is taken away from our freshwater supply. So that is one concern. So how can we prevent it? Basically, we could try to fix the wells, inject them, clean them out, barriers, or try to monitor systems that could improve the water quality. Try to prevent that saltwater intrusion from happening. All right, so these right here are your standard review questions. I know in class, I would always tell you these are where your extra essay questions come from. So I'll read over these real quick, but make sure that you read over these because this is definitely the most important stuff in the PowerPoint. I'll put into basically question forms that would be like on your NCFE, your final. So this is definitely the most important stuff that you need to know from your notes. So explain how the density occurs in the ocean, how it affects the temperature, how it results, and basically the ocean currents distributing heat away from the equator to the poles. All right, so make sure you know that just cold water is more dense than warm. So it's going to change the densities. You're going to start to see a difference. The temperature is going to start changing. So that temperature affects a lot of stuff like the coral reef, anything like that. Number two, go back. Number two, explain how the coastal climates are moderated by the water in comparison to the inland climates. All right, so basically we're just talking about the water temperatures not change that much on land, but in the ocean they can definitely change a lot more. Same thing we talked about one time with the pool. So if you touch the top of the water in the pool, it's going to be a lot hotter than what it's going to be at the bottom just because the sunlight's hitting it. So same thing for the ocean. The further you go out, the more cool it's going to be. All right, so diagram, that's just the water cycle. Just make sure you kind of understand the water cycle and the process. So explain river systems, including the NC river basins, aquifers, watersheds. So this is just kind of what we talked about. Just look at this. Basically just know the river basin, the watersheds, they'll basically drain from one body of water and to another one. So last one, explain how flood events might be affected by groundwater levels. If the groundwater basically are too high, the filtration will not seep in. All right, so we'll start to get some flooding and the water will stay up until it can infiltrate. So this is the last one. So look over this. If you have any questions about that, let me know. Also, this is all the notes for the hydrosphere. So after you watch the first video, in this video, make sure you're just working on that project. All right. That way you have basically the whole week to work on it. So I wouldn't wait till the last minute to work on that. So not too many notes for you to basically listen to or try to read over. So concentrate on that project and try to get that done this week and turn it in on Friday. So like I said, if you have any questions, just let me know. I posted the Google Meet times of when the best time, that I posted. If you can't meet then, that's fine. Let me know another time and we'll try to work something out. All right, you can turn it up. You sure? Yeah, I'm done.